Hey, what's up, guys? Calendros here. So, I had actually uploaded a song last night, but it got blocked by the studios. Um, and I'm working with the band to try and get the issue resolved. So hopefully soon that'll show up. It was a very good review. I think it went great. This stuff happens, and hopefully most everyone out there understands that this is not the bands that do this. It's the labels trying to protect their bands. So it's not that they don't want their bands to get exposure. They just want to make sure that the copyright is protected. Um, the side effect is it's kind of it makes it a pain for us sometimes. Now most labels will do a copyright claim, which is great because they get the band gets the money, or the label gets the money depending on whatever contract, whatever. Um, and the person who puts up the video, get their video still stays up, and but the money, ad revenues, and all that kind of stuff goes to, and the click views go to the artists, which is great. I don't know why some studios choose to block things. It's something that really only they can answer. But I think for anybody out there who has any kind of say, and I'm sure most bands probably don't, in their what their studios choose to how their studios choose to handle copyrighted content out there, in a space like say Twitch or YouTube. I think it really is beneficial to claim rather than block because it really now I'm a very tiny channel. I've got no illusions of the fact that I'm probably not doing a ton to benefit an artist when I do a breakdown or review of one of their songs, but it does, like for a larger YouTube channel, it's going to be a big benefit to your band. So I would say, if you have that pull with your record label, stress to them that this is a way that you can bring more money to everybody. So I wanted to just sort of talk about that at the top, because I have been trying to get more content out there. Um, uh, just got stifled by that, and like I said, hopefully that'll as soon as that regardless of what happens. So if we're not able to resolve the block, that's fine. It's like I said, it's not on the artist. So what I'm going to do in that case is I can't edit it now because it's in dispute, but uh, once the dispute is resolved, whether they reject it or not, once it gets rejected, I can then go in and edit the video and remove the song, and then I'll just put a link to it below in the description, so that way people can they won't be able to hear the song in the video, which I don't like that, but sometimes it has to be done. I know a lot of big time YouTube creators have tried to react to Led Zeppelin, and that is pretty much the only way you are going to be able to react to Led Zeppelin because they block everything. And they are extremely, extremely meticulous about it. So, anyways, this song that we're going to do right now, I mentioned in that video is a song I was going to do today, is one of my favorite songs right now at the moment. And I saw these guys live in Atlanta. This is Oblviscaris. The song is called Devour Me, Colossus. This is part 1 and 2. Part 1 is called Black Holes. Part 2 is Contortions. Contortions is more of just sort of a outro, like I guess you could say it's a coda to the larger song, which is Black Holes. Now, this song is really crazy. There's a ton that goes on in this song. So I'm debating about how I want to handle this one because it's just such a complex song. But on this one, I kind of know that the timestamps So I did not take notes for this one. So I'm going to be doing sort of almost not a fresh react because I've heard this song a ton of times. Um, but I'm not going to be like in the Witherfall song. I had taken notes for the different points of the song. So that was kind of what I did with that one. And this one, I think we're just gonna go straight through and listen to the song, and and then I'm gonna try and remember various parts of the song. I may have to actually refer back to the song and bring up the audio. So I get the timestamps correct because this song has several key changes throughout it that really shift the tonality of the song in a way. This song, it's so funny. It reminded me a lot when I first heard it. It reminded me of Tool, and I'll explain why when we do the recap at the end of the song. So this is Devour Me Colossus. This is an awesome song. Yeah. So let me change this out here to. Actually, probably not going to do the music video because I had a bad experience with that. So I'll probably just go ahead and fire it up now. All right, here we go. This part is so fucking good. Just unbelievable. So that was the end of part 1, Black Holes. This is part 2, Contortions. Okay, so that was Devour Me Colossus, parts 1 and 2. Um, so this song is just, I mean, I think it's just a masterpiece. The first part of the song, the first, I think probably about, let's see here, I think probably, I think the first 5 minutes or so. Let me get through this here. Yeah, so the first 5 minutes of the song is a pretty standard song structure for like a melodic death metal band. Um, you know, very heavy, lot of double bass, and then it's primarily um, mostly just, death metal vocals. There is some cool stuff though in, I believe it's the second verse. There's some interesting tracking of the vocals, where the growls and actually are double tracked, where one is actually kind of more almost into sort of black metal territory, and then underneath that there's like, it's more of a traditional death metal delivery. So you have this really interesting counterpoint of that, and I think that's somewhere. This one says probably around the 4 minute mark, I think. Oh, here it is. So it's around 2.5 minutes in. It's not. It's actually not that far in. So it's about halfway through that opening section, and you can hear that it's not Tim and Zen. It's Zen double tracked, doing two different vocal ranges, which is really cool. And they do that on a couple songs, not a lot of them though. Um, this is the one where it stood out the most to me, but I believe there's some of that, and I don't 100% remember for certain, but I believe there's a little bit of that on Painters in the Tempest as well. Um, I'm not 100% positive on that. I think Painters of the Tempest has some of that, but it's a neat little. It just adds a little more depth to the vocals and sort of changes it up a little bit too, without actually changing sort of the more traditional structure of that first part of the song. Once you get past that 5 minute mark, then the song really changes up drastically. You have this very quiet section that's more of like this part right here, where it's very much like a I don't know, it has a bit of a folk feel to it. You've got kind of like just the general like acoustic feel with the violins, complementing it. Tim really is a big showcase in the song. But the one thing that really starts to take center stage here that I want to really talk about, that is super important to the development of this song as it goes on, is the bass. Cygnus, I believe that's the name of the bass player, was the bass player, is not the bass player anymore, on these first two albums. He puts on it just an absolute masterclass in this song. This is like, at this part of the song, you begin to transcend into like these. The bass is there early on. The bass is always there in the Oblviscaris songs. Their mixing and production is generally really awesome. But you'll notice as this softer section continues, the bass takes more and more and more center stage, and you really hear it a lot in this softer section, because the bass is more audible just by general nature. And he's just playing his ass off in this stuff, man. It's unbelievable stuff. And then we get to a interlude, I think at around the 8-minute mark. Yeah. So have your guitars come back in. I really love the riff. This riff right here is really awesome. It's not around for very long, only about a minute and change, if that. Because then we transition to the third major change in the song, which is really, to me, where the song just takes off into the stratosphere. And so this section has sort of like a, you've got both singers singing at the same time. And more traditional, like when you think of the bigger hits for Oblviscaris, like Play Flowers, the Kaleidoscope, stuff like that. It follows more of that traditional formula. It's slowed down a little bit from the beginning, from the riffs that they're using in the beginning. It's not quite as heavy, but it's got that really signature Oblviscaris sound. And then you go into my personal favorite part of the song, maybe one of my favorite parts in any of their songs, which is at the 9-minute mark. This bass line is, I can't even really accurately describe how awesome this one is, because it reminds me of one of my other favorite bass line, which is similar in nature to this, which is from the Seventh Wonder song, I almost said Unbreakable, but it's not Unbreakable. It's man, okay, I gotta look this up. I hate it when that happens, but the fact that the bass is the central focus and anchor point of this particular change up in the song is what really makes it unique, because there's not a lot of bands that have bass players who can handle that. It's just not something you commonly hear. The song that I was thinking of is "Break the Silence" by Seventh Wonder, and in a very similar way, you have a riff that is completely driving this change up in the song. And in both cases, it's a very complex and difficult bass part, but also very beautiful. And that's the thing that gets me about this part, is it is extremely technical. It's all tapping, but it's and not simple tapping either. We're not talking like single string tapping. It's really a very intricate pattern. This is very difficult stuff to do on the bass, and then it leads into one of my personal favorite things about this, and which to me elevates it beyond the Seventh Wonder bass part, is how the other instruments harmonize with this bass riff as it changes throughout the next couple of minutes, because this riff carries on for quite some time and is constantly evolving. When you talk about progressive metal and progressive music, this is one of the biggest examples. And I mentioned earlier, before we started the review, about how this song reminds me of Tool. And this is the way in which it does, because Tool will take a part and evolve a part throughout the course of a song to build to these incredible climaxes for their songs. And that is exactly what happens in this song, where this bass part serves as the linchpin, and then as it moves along, they're adding sections on top of sections. So first, you have staccato guitar, really heavy staccato guitar riffs come in, and it's on the offbeat, but it's matching up with the bass, and then this continues for a couple of minutes, and then I'll see if I can give you an auditory. Okay, so there's the guitar part, you know. So that's actually matching up with that picking pattern, but just in a riff statement. It's what they're doing there is really next level stuff, and then it evolves again. So that part, this sort of next evolution of it, is the part that I really love. You know, they start bringing in an additional layer of guitars, and then the whole band comes back in full force, because there's drums in here, but it's more of an anchoring beat. So this is where really the whole band comes through. And the bass part continues. It continues to be the anchoring part. And then but you have a full riff that's backing this part now. And then they begin changing the riff as the violin comes in. So now you have the violin playing as a counterpoint to the bass and the drums and the guitar, which are all somewhat in sync here. And then there's the change up on the guitars, where it's like it goes much faster. Sounds like it's either a quad or a sextet every. Yeah, but it's the way that evolves to me is really something extraordinary. And then it comes to the end of the song, and Zen comes in here and really sort of just brings the song to a really fantastic climax. But the real heart of the song is that, you know, couple of minutes from about the 9-minute mark to like the 11.5-minute mark is like the heart of the song, and this is something that's similar to Painters of the Tempest has a similar section in that song, where in Triptych Lux, where there's just this transcendent part. It's shorter, it's not as long as it is in Devour Me Colossus, but it's another part where the band just sort of just goes beyond, and you're just like, what is this? It's insane. So that's sort of what's going on with this one. And then as you move out of that section, you transition into sort of the coda for the song as a whole, which is Contortions. Contortions is a really interesting one because it's I think intentionally dissonant. There's parts of it where the violin, I think, is intentionally somewhat abrasive, and then in the next moment, absolutely beautiful. So I think they were trying to highlight that duality, which is actually, the duality is reflected in the lyrics all throughout this song. The song is all about duality, which is interesting because if you look at the lyrics, which I'm going to bring the lyrics up here. Flesh to flowers, blood to rivers. There's a lot of duality throughout this song. I don't really pretend to know exactly what this song is about. My feeling when I first looked at this, because it talks about Citadel, my first feeling is that this was almost a bit of a total, because the album is Citadel, was that this was more of a total concept album. But I don't really claim to know exactly what they're talking about here. But it's interesting, though, in the second verse, they mention a call from the void, pale tentacles, which, reminds me of this shirt. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. There's a lot of, throughout here, there's a lot of gothic horror imagery. And, because it's funny, because there's parts of it that are almost highly romanticized. And that is also stereotypical of gothic horror in some ways. If you look at, vampires, and, if you go back to even the Cthulhu stuff, there's a lot of romanticizing of certain parts of that gothic horror side of things. So, there's moments where it's like, he mentions about, lover, and um, it's the lyrics as a whole are very evocative, and I'm not certain. I think different writers have different ways of approaching the way that they write lyrics. Sometimes you get a very straightforward narrative, and I think Oblviscaris is a band where, and I don't know who writes most of their lyrics. I think Zen writes a lot of their lyrics. They're somewhat abstract in nature, not abstract in the way that, because Ronnie James Dio was famous for writing really abstract stuff. Like sometimes people were just like, "What the hell is this song even about?" It's not in that way. It's in a way it's similar to me, and which I really love. It's similar to the way um, Vector's lyrics were presented, because there's an almost a poetic nature to the lyrics, but it's not very straightforward in terms of like what it's necessarily about. And I think one of the things, and I believe Zen's actually mentioned this, it might have been in a YouTube comment or something, about how it's really meant to be more of an interpretation by what the listener is hearing. What is this song about to you? Um, and when I'm looking at this, as I go through it, the more I looked at it, and the more I looked at the way that this song presented, it's almost like there was parts of it that were, to me, it seemed like it was more of a welcoming of the void, almost. Like Devour Me, Colossus. Colossus could be like we'll use Cthulhu as an example, right? Because a lot of people know Cthulhu. Cthulhu was in terms of story is supposed to be this gigantic, horrific space entity. But his cult people, I could very easily see them saying, "Devour me," Cthulhu. And so something along the lines of that was kind of the way I felt about it. But there was also a bit of this where you could also apply this to a more real world type scenario of being about a relationship, because people really get invested in relationships, right? And sometimes that, sometimes that can be destructive. Sometimes it can be beautiful. It just depends on, the nature of that relationship. And there are parts of this song that embody both aspects of that. So there's both beauty, and then there's also some parts of it that are just very animalistic and aggressive. So it kind of hits both points. I don't really know what was in their mind when they wrote the lyrics, but this one was a really interesting one to me in terms of the lyrics. I thought it was really interesting stuff, and I'm going to kind of zoom through the lyrics. I'm just going to read them as a thing so you guys can get a feel for them. So, Citadel of hope and white fire, hearken a choir for kings, transcendence. Crowned in teeth and severed wings, is this the end of the flesh? So that kind of fits with what I was saying about the Cthulhu thing, Devour me, Cthulhu, it's the end. He's going to eat you. It's the end of your existence, right? My prison and my salvation, which is a line that really hits both things I mentioned about the relationship and, being eaten by some greater extraplanar entity. So, and in this part here, which is the most direct reference I could think of to like a Cthulhu, would be a call from the void, pale tentacles enthroned, alone, dying. Down with my draped leeches, O lover, melancholia. Those last two lines were really interesting, very evocative, but very interesting. And then, You fill my lungs, am I undone? Where I swallow the light, drown me in your arms so deep. This was kind of the chorus of the song, so to speak, because this is repeated several times throughout. Drown me in your arms so deep. This is the part that Tim is singing. Drown me in your arms, abyssal worm well, which that's such an odd, that is like a just almost random in its nature. Fathomless, drown me in your arms. Again, you could really take this either way. The things like abyssal wormwell really evoke that the sort of the Cthulhu-esque aspect of it. So I don't know if that's really what it is. And then moving on to the next verse, anatomy of space and time, gathered in veiled depths, descendant. Are these God's tears in this pitch black tomb, or the pain of my memories? I love that line. Of all suffering, awake architects, the mother, the father, the eye. Trumpets below, the ripples transfigure, wretched am I. So there's a rhyming couplet there. The mother, the father, the eye, wretched am I. Which is not something they do all the time. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they chose to do the rhyme there. I don't know if it was even intentional. A lot of this, again, seems to fit the Cthulhu thing I was talking about earlier. And then next line, the next stanza, is white eyes and blue lips. Lover, devour me, drown me in your arms, abyssal wormwell. Oh no, that was that was actually the part that I just did. No, it wasn't. Okay. White eyes and blue lips, lover, devour me, drown me in your arms, abyssal wormwell, fathomless, drown me. So this is the chorus. But the difference here is the first couple of parts of that are different. There's a difference. Because in the first version of this chorus, it's you fill my lungs, am I undone, where I swallow the light. And then in this one, it's white eyes and blue lips, lover, devour me, drown me in your arms. And then it's interesting. I thought it was strange the way that was sort of presented, but it definitely is more of a traditional structure. And then the last line, the last stanza, before the main transition, the first transition in the song, is a burning gauntlet held to her breast. In her arms the phoenix lay blackened in mourning, a purging of ashes down her hourglass figure. Inscribed on my heart, devour me, Colossus. Again, this part, interestingly, this stanza is more of like a true romance type thing, but Gothic romance, This had that sort of, this particular stanza really had that vibe to it. Because I didn't really get too much of the Cthulhu feel from this particular stanza. And then we have the transition. So this is at about the 6-minute mark. Scent of the earth, touch of the light. Here, where colors collide, this black hole ignites my world in bloom. Now, this black hole ignites. Again, this all sort of feeds into the Cthulhu aspect, I feel, because Cthulhu was an extraplanar entity. So he was, from space. He was this crazy entity from space. So, I mean, the black hole thing sort of, jives with that. This black hole ignites. But this could also be more of a it could be somewhat of like a more abstract theoretical representation of like, again, romance, right? This black hole ignites my world in bloom could be like, talking about like their love or whatever, or passion, So that could fit with that it could fit with either one. So, and then when you move on to this next session, this is more, I think this is right after the bass part, you know. Flesh to flowers, blood to rivers, my breath to the wind. No, actually, you know what? No, this is the part right before the bass part, is what this is. This is that, the part that's kind of like a little bit heavier, before it sort of slows down again to go into the bass section. Flesh to flowers, blood to rivers, my breath to the wind. The stars steal my eyes and the sun sears my mind. I love that line. This black hole ignites my world in bloom. There's repetition used throughout here. And repetition always, if you've studied poetry, repetition is used for emphasis. So this black hole ignites my world in bloom is repeated again. Here I stand, Citadel, here I stand. Again, Citadel is mentioned in the very first line, and then it's mentioned again here. So I don't know exactly the nature of the whole Citadel thing. The album is called Citadel, but here where colors collide. This is the last line, and this is after the bass section. Here where colors collide, the black hole ignites my world in bloom, scent of the earth, touch of the light. Here where colors collide, this black hole ignites my world in bloom, my world in bloom, in bloom. So this is, here where colors collide is the only line in this part. Actually, this is all repeated stuff in different orders. So none of this is actually original lyrics. It's parts from throughout the song. Most of it from the last couple of stanzas, right? So here where colors collide was used back up again, where it's the order is different, because before it was scent of the earth, touch of the light, here where colors collide. Now it's here where colors collide, the black hole ignites my world in bloom, scent of the earth, touch of the light, here where colors collide, this black hole ignites my world in bloom. So at the end of the day, I don't know exactly which way to go with that. I'm leaning more towards the Cthulhu type entity. I don't think it is Cthulhu. I think it's an entity that's reminiscent of a Cthulhu type entity, and people's utter devotion to this being, almost like a fanatical love for this being. So, but I mean, who knows? It could be like, just a metaphor for romance. So, I think either is just as likely, and I think the beauty of music is that you can interpret the lyrics whichever way you want. So, that was Devour Me, Colossus. This was a heck of a song. The last part of it, again, is just that little instrumental coda that I think is meant to intentionally be dissonant, especially when you look at the almost bipolar aspect of certain parts of this song, where it seems like it's swinging back and forth between, intense aggression and these just beautiful parts with a good deal of melancholy to them as well. So I think that last coda is really perfect in that, in sort of just continuing that balance between, beauty and dissonance. So it's really cool. It's a nice little out. But interestingly enough, this album opens the record, and it opened the show when I saw them in Atlanta. Great show, great song to open the show with, in my opinion. Really gets the crowd pumped. That, from that bass part on, the crowd is they're just going nuts, man. It was something. So, well, I think that's about it for this review. It's been I think a fairly lengthy review. But great song. Keep an eye out for more. I will be doing actually another Witherfall song, regardless of what happens with the one that's currently we're dealing with the copyright block on. In talking with Joseph Michael from the band, he I asked him what song, would be good to review from your first album, and because I've heard the whole album, but like I was interested to see what his favorite was, and he was very very adamant that Nobody Sleeps Here is the song to do. So sometime this coming week, probably midweek, we'll get back around to Witherfall and do Nobody Sleeps Here. And if you've not heard that song, it is quite a trip. So yeah, be prepared for some really. It's gonna be such a pain to break that song down because it's so schizophrenic, intentionally schizophrenic. There's a reason why. So, anyways, I will see you guys. Stay metal. Have a good one.